Greetings dear viewers, in this video I'm going to teach you how to create bass like the one that I made in my track called Foolin' Myself, which got signed and released with Rhythmic. So here's a small demo so you can understand what I'm talking about. So as you can hear, this is like a long Foghorn bass, but at the same time, this is a mainstream song, which is really cool because, you know, everybody loves a Foghorn now and then, but Foghorn kind of drum and bass is dying off. Like, it's probably dead by now. And, you know, I found a way to actually make it work with LIQUICITY, which is like, it's almost funny because LIQUICITY has been releasing a lot of like really happy, melodic, like sometimes even childish and, you know, fairy tale kind of drum and bass. And I really love that. Don't get me wrong. That's all me. Like, that's who I am on the inside. But, you know, we all love a Foghorn every now and then. So I kind of managed to just squeeze that one in, and I'm gonna teach you how that's done. So obviously, like, first thing that you gotta pay attention to is that you need more layers, because if you just make a straight out like Foghorn, it's not going to work. It's going to be a little bit too much in the face. But regardless of that, before we talk about layers and everything, we have to make the actual Foghorn first, because if that doesn't succeed, all the other layers, they don't matter. So let's get started. And here's how we do this. We open our serum, and first thing we do is we select a second oscillator. We put a sine wave on there, and that's the type of sound that we want to go for. So next thing we do is we switch the octave by -2 in the first oscillator. So our sawtooth makes that vibration. I don't know how to call it exactly. It's a little bit like roary. And our sine wave, we want it to go 1 octave up. Next thing we want to do is we want to use the frequency modulation, FM from B specifically right here. And we're going to adjust that one later, but one thing for sure, we want our bass to, like, the normal thing with Foghorns is that they kind of explode and implode. So we want an LFO that does just that. We switch it to an envelope mode, so it works every time we click. And we use an LFO on the level knobs of both oscillators. So that's what we want to go for. And I'm gonna actually speed it up to 174 so you can actually get the feel of how it's gonna sound in the drum and bass track. And let me draw the bass right here, and let me add some drum loop from my sample pack. By the way, you can buy all of these sample packs on arcsamples.com, so you can go there and buy these drums. So yeah, here's the drum pattern and like the bass idea that we want to go for. I'm gonna make the drums a little bit quieter right now, just because we want to pay attention to the bass in the mix. So next thing we want to go and do is we want to open up the sub oscillator and do a -2 octaves and add an LFO there right as well. So now every single LFO is every single oscillator, both sub A and B, are all controlled by the same LFO, which means that you have total control over what's going on in your bass. And that is very important. Well, not on every stage, but most of them, otherwise your sound is going to fall apart. So it sounds a little bit more fat like this. And next thing we want to do is we want to go to Effects, open Distortion, go choose a hard clip, and see if that sounds good. See, that works really well. For example, right here, because we have a lot of LFO control, we don't need to add any like LFO control on here. Distortion sounds well. It begins where it's supposed to begin, and when the sound goes lower in volume, it kind of falls as well. It fades a little bit. So that's what you get. Like, you actually get a pretty cool and fat sound. What you want to add here is also chorus, because you want it to be a little bit more wide. That's okay, I guess. So yeah, now it's all about your taste. So you can play around, make the sine wave, sorry, not the sine wave, but the sawtooth a little bit quieter if you want. That's what some people like. I'm gonna make it a little bit more quiet just now. And one thing that I did specifically for this bass, which I found sounded pretty cool, which you barely, I don't think you can even recognize this filter in the song, but I used it anyways because it changed the sound just a little, is the notch filter. So I'm using notch filter with both oscillators and a little bit of a drive. So we're gonna play the key for a few times and play around with the cutoff to see which position sounds better. So you can see that it's it's doing a little bit of that. So trying and applying the same LFO might help. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Maybe you can even open up the saw a little bit more. Yeah, it's okay, I guess. I guess it's fine. So you can make the sound a little bit more fat, give a little bit more drive. And now basically what you have to do is to choose a reverb you want to use. And the way that I make reverb with basses like this is that you want the sound to be as dry as possible on the peak of its power, and while it fades you want the bass to be introduced. So that's one of the ways you can do this, is by using a reverse LFO1 like this. So you go to negative 50%. And you can hear that when the bass fades, the reverb kicks in. You want a little bit more space, you want a little bit more size, and maybe making the bass a little bit more wet. So something like this. So it's pretty much the same as making sidechain for your reverb, except for you don't have to do that. It's way more easier like this. And yeah, I think that works really, really well. So one more thing that I really like to use here to make like really good control is I sometimes use filters, and those filters I'm using for like to make sure that those ugly artifacts don't pop up. So here's how it sounds. And in the end, well, what I do is I cut off all the low end because we don't need a lot of low end. And I add a little bit of LFO1 on the high end. Not that much, obviously. There we go. So that sounds pretty cool. And we have like, you know, it's like half finished, but it's already like a foghorn. And we can apply it to a mixer track right now. So it's going to be track 1 in the mixer. And I'm going to use a plugin called Thermal. So this is the plugin that I use for a lot of cool distorted basses. And in this particular video, what I want to use is, I think it's called Harmonic Tremolo is the one that I used. This is the preset, but it's got a little bit of like of that tremolation, so we want to remove that. So basically, you just turn this one off. And you don't use it by 100%, maybe like 20%, something like that. Next step, we want to add some really cool distortion. So I'm going to add Wave Shaper. If you're using a different software, you can add like FabFilter Saturn. It's fine. So that, yeah. Sounds really fat and maybe even too loud for the video. But I mean, I'm going to make the FL Studio a little bit more quieter. Yeah. So maybe the sine wave is a little bit too loud. Yeah, I switched the notch filter a little bit so it sounds better. And did a little bit like less loudness on the high end, like the high octave sine wave, so it sounds better. And now what I want to do is I want to make sure that there's not too much mid information, like high mid information, and like it changes the sound to be a little bit more gentle, but at the same time you can add a little bit of treble. Why not? And then make sure that you don't have all those all that low end stuff, you don't need any of that. Also, when you use a bass like that, one thing you can do is you can switch a note and play it in a different key. And it's gonna sound really nice. Also, like if you want it to be a little bit more wide, you can play around with the unison. And you know, I try not to add too much of that, but it can sound pretty cool. You see, but sometimes the bass starts falling apart. It has a little bit too much stereo right now. So it depends on your purpose. What I would do is like with sine waves, I want them to be like in a like one voice mode, because they are a little bit easy to spoil. But in this one, I can add a little bit more voices. So oh yeah, it's too loud. Or this. Try this key, for example. Really nice. Okay, so we got the idea. And, you know, play around with a few equalizers. One thing that I do to sometimes make the sound a little bit more loud and more in the face is use vocoders, which is, if you're not using FL Studio, I bet you have a vocoder like that. It is an absolutely unique plugin, but I only barely change anything, but yeah, let's see. It's a little bit too voicey, so I'm gonna... Yeah, it gets a little bit too voicey. So like when that happens, what I did with the original track, I used Soothe, and I kind of fixed the mid information because it became really dirty. So something like this. So basically this is like a really complex dynamic equalizer that you can use, and it's gonna help you cut out all of the unnecessary frequencies. And this is the result that we get. What I hear this track is lacking is, again, high frequencies, which we cut out before, but we're gonna add them manually through equalizer right now. Let's see what we want. And maybe... Let's see if we want our like highest octave to be that loud. That sounds okay, I guess. So, ooh, it's really loud, guys. I didn't expect it to sound that loud on FL Studio. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use limiter to make sure it's much quieter than that. And there's a lot of that reverb stuff playing, but don't worry, it's not going to be in the track. It's just when I click stop, it's the artifacts that appear. So maybe fix the thermal a little bit. We don't need that much depth. Yeah, it's starting to sound a little bit better. So make... It's always like playing around and seeing if we want more of that. Yeah, maybe a little bit less is actually better. Anyways, what we want to do next is we want to add the sub bass and all the other stuff to make sure that the track actually sounds like music. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna add limiter and a soft clipper here, and I want to add the sub dun 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 kind of a bass, and that's so easily achievable. If you open Serum, just make a sub pattern, use a sine wavetable, randomizer to 0, a little bit of attack pre-delay because we don't want our sub bass to be clicky. It's really annoying. Like if you can hear that in a song, that's really annoying. So we're gonna draw a really simple picture of the bass like this, and maybe like go a few octaves down like this. So now we have a really cool fat sub bass. I'm gonna put it on a mixer track number 2 and just add a little bit of loudness. So there you go. And Next thing we want to make sure that, you know, our drums work well is we can create a really simple sidechain control MIDI. So that's how you usually do that. I'm usually doing that with the plugin called Kickstart. So you can see the Kickstart is there, and I'm gonna open it on the mixer track number 2, assign to MIDI, go to control options, input port, there you go. You can hear the bass ducking under each kick and snare like this. And also one last thing I forgot about the Foghorn bass. If you want it to slide down the key, turn on the mono and legato, and port time, maybe portamento time, maybe like 500 milliseconds. So let's see if that's what we want to do. Oh, it's a little bit too fast, right? Maybe slower. So let's see what would be the better one. Maybe make the LFO a little bit slower. Really depends on the purpose. So yeah, it's very gentle. You can only hear that in the very end of the sample. And maybe the bass is a little bit too sharp. So I want to change it around. Something like this, for example. We can use hyperdimension for extra width if we want. Yeah, it's just like really easy to do. So now for the bass to work, we want to make sure that the sub bass has an extra layer, because otherwise sub bass you cannot really hear like this little dun 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 dun. We cannot hear that groove. So to assist that groove, we can use a separate layer. We're gonna call it mid bass, and I'm gonna switch it to a free mixer track. I'm gonna assign it there, and I'm gonna use, like, you can use a kick drum. You can take a kick drum, put it right here, and use that as your initial wavetable. And that is actually a really cool way of doing that. So what you can do right now is you can, you know, low pass this little kick wavetable like this, add a few voices, and maybe add a little bit of equalizer on the high end to make sure it's a little bit more pointy. So that is like, you need that kind of sound if you want to open up the groove of the sub bass a little more. And this is like more of a mid-high bass, I would say. And make sure that you don't have any low end, but this wavetable doesn't have it. But we want also like a mid bass, which is a little bit more fat. Usually you can do this from like really simple wavetables, which are somewhere in between of like a sawtooth and a sine wave. Usually it's something like this, maybe? I don't know. It's actually square wave and sine wave, something like that. So some of these are pretty good. What I like to do is I like to play with the wavetable a little bit. And wait, I need it the other way around. Yeah, like this. So these are pretty cool. You can use them like that. So you don't need any sub bass right here, so you're gonna remove that. But it's gonna give the body that your overall bass is lacking. The mid bass body can be loud, but the high mid bass, the pointy one, should only be like, if you really want to have cool style in your songs, if you don't want them to be like super annoying with all the elements in the face, make sure that you make it a little bit more stylish. You put some of those sounds behind. So you're gonna put those mid basses in a separate mixer track. So this is a mixer track number 3, and we're gonna add a kickstart to make sure they are side chaining as well. And there you go. So as you can see, it's really easy actually to make a really cool, let's say like a Foghorn bass, which can also be used in mainstream. But the only thing you want to do is to have a great timing, because right now I feel like it's not timed well. So, oh yeah, it's a little bit better now. So like now the next thing that you can do is you can just add like an arpeggio, which is super easy to make. Just choose a wavetable that is really similar to a typical sawtooth. Not this one, but maybe something like that. So it's slightly different, so it's a little bit weird. You can see it has some weird stuff going on, but yeah, you can add a quick LFO with an envelope right here and make a melody. Let's try that. So usually I draw the copy of like a bass note like this, and then I start making like my own melody. Oops. Maybe something like that would be a little bit better. Yep. You're gonna add a few voices if you want, something like that. Adding some reverb. Removing the low end. Adding some delay, putting it on here. Make sure that your delay doesn't have too much stuff going on in the high spectrum, because it's gonna confuse the hell out of the listener. You want to make sure that the arpeggio keys are actually clicking. Yeah, so this way it's pretty soft. Maybe you want some extra LFO on... Oh, by the way, I forgot to say that I'm using delay in ping pong mode because it makes the arpeggio a little bit more wide. Also, sometimes I'm going to use LFO to make high end a little bit more open. But make sure that you use if you do that, make sure you use equalizer before you use reverb in the chain. Otherwise, your reverb is going to be ducking under the LFO on the frequency spectrum as well, which is not good. This is much better. So there we go. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to buy these drums and other drums and a lot of different basses and really cool sounds, and if you want to buy a whole breakdown of how I created a track called Runnin', which was released with Viper Recordings, go to arcsamples.com. The link is in the description. And yeah, share some of your comments, some of your thoughts, share your demos. Let me know if you like what you see, and let me know if you want to see something else specific on this channel. And yeah, I wish you best of luck creating music. See you next week. Bye.